Welcome to the Storypowers Podcast, the show about the power of stories, the people who tell them, and why you should be doing it too. I'm your host, keynote speaker and storytelling coach, Francisco Mahfuz. My guest today is Tony Anagor. Tony is the CEO of LifestyleDMC, an incentive and team building agency working with international organizations like IBM, Coca Cola, and Google. He also works with C-level leaders, helping them build and shape their companies, and teaches top scientists how to get their ideas funded. Tony is a man who finds the corporate world very easy. Leadership troubles, underperforming teams, lack of funding. None of that stuff is a real challenge when you've spent the last decade raising triplets and not going completely insane. Ladies and gentlemen, Tony Anagor. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and excited to be here.
Tony, one of the things that you do that I wanted to talk about, and I do realize that this might be a bit of a weird way to look at it, but this is a show about stories and the power of stories, and I wanted to start talking to you about the part of your CV or your professional interest that in theory has less to do with story, which is the whole the events company. So the things you do for companies. And what I was trying to see, when I saw, I know that part of what you do, but I was trying to figure out how much of a narrative or an overarching story goes into a planned event, or how much should it go?
Well, that's a really good question to kick off this interview, and actually it's fundamental. It's key to any event. Any event is a story. There are players in the story. There are the usual hero's journey, right? That happens in the story. So you there are the protagonists. So the people who you want to please. There are the people who want to please the people who want to please. There's a problem that they're facing. When somebody does an event, when a company decides to organize an event, there's normally a reason behind it. There's a challenge that they're trying to overcome. There's a problem that they're trying to solve. And our job as event planners is to try and figure out what that narrative is. What is the problem that they're trying to solve? Oftentimes they don't know. We get requests like, we need something wow. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, it's just going to be something wow, better than it was last year and the year before. So that to a trained event planner, there are some cues there as to how you can begin to unravel that and find out the story and the players who are playing the parts within that story.
And when it comes to the events themselves, how much do you and your team have to figure out? Okay, so how much do you have to design a story essentially? How much is it? Is that level of complexity or planning that goes into it, other than just this is the icebreaker, or this is just to get everybody relaxed, and then this is we do this thing, and then the company wants us to do that thing. How much thought has to go into? Okay, well, here we're taking them up, here we're taking them down.
The best type of requests that we get are when they are 3-4 day events, and we are working with the event planning team on their side to craft and co-create the event. They're the best type of events what we get, because we really get an opportunity to investigate, to ask questions, to provoke, to then start looking at using our experience and our knowledge and fusing that with the experience and knowledge of the event planners on the company side, and creating something that's really, really unique. And there are some clues. If we get asked anything from 12 to 18 months out for an event, and it's a 3-4 day type of event, they're generally clues that the person or the company you're dealing with is really putting some thought into this, and they really want to make an impact with the event. And it could either be for the company themselves, or it could be for the company's clients that they want to do the event. But typically, the longer lead time, the longer run up you have to the event, the better prepared you can be. And it shows that it's not just an afterthought, that it's an event that really wants to make an impact. So we normally say start with the end in mind, right? So what's the impact you're looking to make, and who are you looking to make this impact on, and what is the reason for this impact? So we start from there, and then we can kind of work our way backwards. We use an Enw model. So we ask, what would be expected from this event? So we get a list of all the things that are expected. And then we say, okay, what are the things that would be nice to have? You were flicking through a magazine one day and you thought, oh, it'd be nice to do that. It'd be nice to do that. So then we have a list of all the nice things. And then we say, what would be wow? What would be really wow about this event? Just dream. So then we come away with almost like a wish list of our clients, the expected stuff, the stuff that would be nice to have, and the stuff that's wow. And our job is to kind of put that into a cocktail and fuse that together with our knowledge of event planning and how we put that together and really come up with a unique event.
And you said that some companies will organize these things 12 to 18 months out. What I find difficult to understand is if a company is looking so far ahead, then, that says quite a lot of nice things about the company and how well they plan. But when they tell you what they want, realistically, how much can that be a reflection on their teams and the dynamics within their teams when is this much time out? I mean, surely the team that you get 12 to 18 months out is not going to be the same team, at least in the sense of how they interact with each other and what moment they're going through, than the team that they originally booked the event for.
Yeah, I think it's important to establish what we mean by team. So a team could be anything from 5 people to 5,000, and so typically the more complex the event. So, for example, at the moment we're working on one for a couple of thousand people, which will take place in 2022. We have a long lead time. We have a lot to plan. There are lots of intricate points to put into place that need to be put into place when you're moving such a large amount of people. So these require lead times. Now, if it's an event for 20 people, then you're absolutely right. An event for 20 people, you don't need an 18-month lead time for that type of event.
Okay. And I think you alluded to this a bit when you talked about what they tell you when they book the event.
Yeah.
But when you're talking to whoever your contact is within those companies, how much it becomes pretty obvious that how much the stories that are happening within that company become obvious. I mean, how easy it is to say, okay, well, this company is going through this type of thing, even if they don't make it obvious to you.
Yeah, I mean, so I really love this question, and I love it for 2 reasons. One, because if you'd asked me this question when I first started 20 years ago, I would have had a completely different answer. So I'll give you the answer of my 20 years experience. And we certainly feel at this stage that we cannot launch an event or begin the planning of an event without asking these key questions. We want to know what's the story. We want to know what's going on in the company for you at this point to decide to do this event. And it does require some very brave questioning. Questions that I probably wouldn't have asked maybe 20 years ago. But at this stage, I think it's really important. And also, I think that the clients expect you to ask these kind of questions. I'm known in the company as the Chief Questions Officer because I don't really have all of the answers, but I just have loads of questions. And oftentimes, I'll ask the questions that perhaps you haven't asked yourself as to, why are you doing this event? And what it actually means. And the more they tell us about the reason they're doing the event, what's happened in the past, what are the things that they like, what things that they don't like. You start to get a feel. Sometimes you get the sense that actually it's the big boss that's decided they want to do this event, and that's why we're going to Capri, because the big boss has an affinity with that particular island. But have you really asked the staff whether that's what they want to do? And so you get a feel for, is this a company which is managed from the top down? Is this a company which is managed by consulting with all of the staff and making kind of decisions that are joint decisions, taking into consideration the staff? So you start to get a feel for the company that you're dealing with from the way in which they approach their events.
It's interesting, the idea that once you've been in the industry long enough, that type of questioning becomes essential to something that a lot of people would think has nothing to do with that. You think organizing an event is organizing an event. Why do you need to know what's going on in the company? Just put something nice, we'll have fun, and all of that. But I find that almost any work that is done within a company that has anything to do with leadership, with team engagement, missions, values, almost anything, if you can't get what the real story is, then you just hamstrung. That there's no way to do that work. And one of the types of work that I do, and you come across that, is people talking about, they want to create a nicer story for their mission or whatever, what the company's purpose is. But you say, okay, fine. So what's going on now? So what do your people think the mission is? So what do the people think are the values of the company? And they sometimes people act as if one thing has nothing to do with the other. It's like, well, no, we can decide what the mission is, or we can decide what the values is, and that's it. I mean, it's a leadership decision. But it's not. And if there is if there's a chasm between what the top of a company thinks is happening or wants to happen and what everybody on the front lines think, then you just get people scoffing at, like people do today. Company missions are one of the most superfluous exercises ever, because you ask anyone that actually works in a company, says, "Oh, what are your values?" Like, I mean, okay, so that leads us into some of the other work you do, which is what I wanted to talk to you more about, and is the work you do with C-level leaders. And so there's this line you use when you describe it, and you're talking about building and shaping departments and companies, and there's a lot that goes into it. But what I wanted to understand is how story, or your view of story or narrative, or however you want to think of it, how does that fit into that part of the work?
So when I start a coaching interrogation. I'm just
that's a nice Freudian slip there.
You know what it is? Because the way I'm sat here and I'm feeling like, okay, I'm here. I've got these lights here, and it feels like an interrogation. And my brain is saying,
they are your own lights.
Frank. My brain is saying, I know. My brain is saying, it's Frank. We're in a bar. We're having a talk. I'm not being interrogated. We're just having a chat, right?
I mean, sorry, you mean you haven't been drinking this whole time?
Just water for now. Just water.
I mean, who knows what's inside this bottle?
No. So the setting, as I said to you at the top of the conversation, this is the first time I've done this, and it's quite exciting to do. I'm quite enjoying it. But you're talking about stories, and I see everyone as a story. I see it's just. We're all a story, and then we're all stories within stories, and we have these stories jostling for supremacy in our conscious mind as to, okay, this is the story I'm going to tell you today. So, when I meet somebody for the first time, and we're about to embark upon a coaching journey, my brain says, okay, I need to know this person's story, right? I need to know this person's story. But not just that, is then I want to understand, why is it that you chose to tell me that particular story, right? What's the story behind the story? And so it's like opening these layers of an onion to try and get to the root of what is the main story. I did an exercise in confinement with my wife about maybe 6 or 7 months ago, which was to find my story. And Frank, it was a really painful exercise, I have to tell you. You know, it took about 3 hours, but I said, look, I need you to sit down and I need you to ask me 2 questions. What does that give you and why? Everything I say, just answer, what does that give you, Tony, and why? Everything I say. And so it was a bit uncomfortable initially, but it took about 3 hours until we finally got to what was the story behind my story, behind the story. And that's fascinating for me.
So let's go a little deeper in that one. When you say finding my story, what do you mean? I mean, what is the definition of my story in that particular scenario?
My why, right? Why do I say yes to certain projects and no to others? Why do I feel uncomfortable in certain circles and comfortable in others? There's a reason, there's a narrative, there's a story I'm telling myself. And it doesn't matter whether it's true or not, it's a story. And so when I was able to recognize that in myself, it was a watershed moment. And I realized that it's what I do with my clients all the time. But it's like going to the barbers, right? They're really good at doing your hair, but when you look in the mirror at the reflection of the hairstyle of the barber, you think, well, he could do with taking some of his own lessons. And it's the same thing as a coach. We're always being pushed to look at ourselves in the mirror, and you see the reflection of the lessons you should learn in the people that are attracted into your circle for coaching.
I find it interesting that you use a barber metaphor or analogy, given that you have a completely shaved head. I'm not sure what that says about your trust in other barbers' skills.
Listen, I have to let you know that this takes about an hour to go. When I go to the barbers, this takes about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. The devil's in the detail.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Okay, so I understand that exercise, and I understand that exercise it has immense power, but what it also will typically do or have is resistance. You know, I don't think a lot of people, at least in my experience, a lot of people are not that keen on going through an exercise like that.
Yeah.
So when you try to do that in a coaching exercise within a company, do you get, how much pushback do you get? How do you overcome that?
Yeah. So before I say yes to any coaching journey, there are a series of questions or a series of ticks that I require. It's like going to the gym, right? If you go to the gym, a good trainer would say, okay, let's do a health check to make sure that you have no underlying medical problems. Let's try and figure out what it is you want to do in terms of, I want to lose 15 kilos. Okay, when was the last time you lost 15 kilos? Never. Okay, how many kilos have you lost in the last 10 years? None. In fact, I've put on 15 or 20. Okay, so it starts to build a picture that the person that you're working with needs some more thought. Okay, so before I get to a position where I say, okay, let's go on this coaching journey, I do what I call the turnstile. Go out of the stadium, think about it, and then come back in, and that works for me. It works quite well. I don't always get it right, but typically, I want somebody to be in a neutral position when they make a decision of whether they're going to do coaching or not. In other words, I don't need you to be, yes, I really want to do this, because that motivation we have is a very fickle friend. It's great when you're very positive, but then in the cold light of day, when you have to do some work and you have to really work on yourself and ask these questions, that motivation lacks, it dissipates. So I do some exercises to make sure that you've thought that process through before we embark upon a coaching journey.
My wife has taken a very similar approach to our relationship. She went outside the stadium for 5 years and then came back, but I think she needed a passport when she came back, so I'm not sure how how neutral
stamps, right?
how neutral that position was. Yes. Okay,
Sounds like there's a story there.
There's always. I if anything, I tell too many. If our mutual friend Florian Mook has made a point of, whenever he gives me feedback on any of my stories or my speaking, I think there was a point of feedback that he would just say, "No more wife stories." Yes, I've now replaced them by children's stories, which is also a very prolific source of, I'm not sure if inspiration is the word or transpiration, but one of the two for sure.
Yeah.
And so you if you're working with someone, particularly within a company, is what I'm more interested in. How much do you find that C-level executives are aware of this look at things as a narrative or as a story? Is this something that is very clear in their heads already, or is that something that you have to teach them essentially?
Yeah. So typically, sounds tough, but typically, we have to unlearn what we think we already know, and that does involve an intricate matrix of asking questions, of painting a picture, putting tessellating experiences and past ideas that you may have had, putting them together on a map, and then asking you to say, well, what do you see? I mean, that's what we try and do in a coaching session. Is my job is to ask questions, observe, take the answers, put them down, keep asking questions, observe, put them down, and then I kind of show them to you and say, right, what do you see there? What is it that you see based on what you've told me? And then you hear, no, there was this and there was this. Okay, right, so where does that fit in? And so we look to build a picture, and those pictures are based on the stories that you've told yourself or that you've heard. And in companies, there's a kind of a thin dividing line between the stories that you tell yourself and the stories that your company tells you. And sometimes you mix the two, and you think that the story the company's told you is actually your story. The most successful are when you get people who understand themselves and understand where the company is, what the company's values are, what the company's stories is, and then the work is, well, how do I make sure that I can have an impact on what the company's story is? How do I make sure, without changing my own story, without changing my own narrative, how do I make sure that I have an impact on my company and those people around me? That's the challenge.
One of the things that you also do, which I started doing last year, is being involved with the IESE MBA, particularly with the communication part of it, which is, I think this year, wasn't it voted or chosen or whatever, the top MBA in the world?
Several years running.
I think last year, I don't know what rankings we're looking at, but I think from the one I saw was from The Economist, and for 2020 was the top MBA. I think it seems to always hover somewhere between 1 and 10. But anyway, it's a good one. No, but what I wanted to ask is something that I imagine that sort of it's an area that you get a lot of things in common between the work you do inside the company or directly with an executive and in that communications MBA is effectively how they communicate. And we know that in public speaking and most types of communication, storytelling is a very useful tool for communicating. And I know that in the MBA, that's perhaps a much easier sell because they're there for that. And that's at least been my experience. How do you find that that's the contrast there about how when you're trying to teach people how to communicate better with stories or whatever other technique you're using, how much more likely they are to listen to you and want to implement it if you're teaching them in the MBA compared to when you're there in the company trying to say, I see the way you're actually talking to your people and that's not going to work?
Well, in the essay, as you said, people are there for a specific reason. Okay. In many ways, you're preaching to the converted, right? They get it. They have been in positions where they realize how important communication is. When I'm dealing with companies and I'm working with their teams, they also have they're in the real world themselves, and they realize that there is something else. There's something missing. There's something, a skill set that they could improve on. And so my work really, when I work with companies outside of educational institutions, I like to just tell stories of how powerful communication is. Communication to yourself internally and communication with others. I remember 20 or 30 odd years ago, I can't remember now, when I did the Tony Robbins Unleash the Power Within weekend, I remember the first thing he said was the quality of your life is directly related to the quality of your communication. And I think when you start with some empirical truths, whether you're in ESA, whether you're working for a corporate company, it's an empirical truth. We know that to be the truth. We know that to be a fact. And so when you start from that base and then you begin to tell stories and narratives of how, if you follow me on this journey and we learn to improve our communication skills, the advantages, the benefits are clear. And I think once people are on that journey, then there's very little pushback. I will say the big difference between working in an institution, an educational institution like ESA, and then working in the corporate world is there is a lot more follow through. In ESA, I notice, I connect with many of the students that I work with, and I can see their improvements. I can see what they're doing. They maintain contact with me, and they send me messages of how they're doing great speeches or how they the successes they're having. In corporate companies, it tends to be, we had a great time, and then back into the real world, back into the real, and this isn't their fault. It's a big bear bug that I have, is that we do a great course. Where's the follow-up? I'd like to meet you in 6 months' time or in another year's time to follow up on the skills that we've began to work on. And that's lacking, I find, in the corporate world.
I think you actually like that the Tony Robbins quote, if my memory doesn't fail me, because I've seen it not that long ago, is the quality of your life is directly dependent on the quality of your questions. I think it's right. Questions directly, which
mine was 30 years ago, so he's upgraded.
Yes, he might have, but yes, with the follow through, I think it's a very important point, because one of the things that I remember when I started down the path I'm now, which involves, among other things, speaking, but also the corporate training, and I was talking to some of our mutual friends who have been doing this for a very long time, and I had this feeling of, how much is a workshop that you deliver over a couple of days, how much is this actually a transformational process for a company, or how much does the company genuinely intend it to be a transformational process, and how much is this business flavored entertainment? And I got a mix of messages, but it seems to be that I think that the further you go from the way they normally do things, the bigger the chance that if the workshop you're running is not with the C-level executives, then it might just be business flavored entertainment than something where they're generally committing to it. I was actually talking to some people from Anecdote, who are a story consultancy company that has been doing this for 16, 17 years. And the way they've developed their story program over the years, I think the current iteration of it is the workshops. So they usually do them over a couple of days, or four sessions now that everybody's online. But then they will have 6 months of activities online, or follow through on email or messages or whatever, just to try and actually make something happen. Because they say, however great the workshop is, even the people that do really well at it, if there's no follow through, 3 months down the line, they just come back to communicating the way they always did. Particularly, from a lot of people, telling stories as a way of communicating is not a natural way of communicating. So that follow through is quite important. So what do you do about it, and how can you present that problem before the work and not after the work, so it doesn't become as much of an issue as it's likely to become?
Yeah. Well, I have a belief that this big breakthrough kind of events or breakthrough experiences are overrated. They are important. I mean, you can get bitten by a dog today, and that changed the rest of your life. You can hate dogs. So small. So those big breakthrough events can have an effect. But I think they're overrated. I think the idea of small, tiny habits, consistency, and discipline along the way is much more important than just doing one big breakthrough. And that's a message I take to a lot of companies. I'm finding now, funnily enough, due to what's going on, people do have more time. People are able to reflect, and the narrative I'm getting from companies now is they're actually prepared to stop and listen. I mean, imagine I'm speaking to companies who they would never have let their staff work from home 2 years ago. Absolutely unthinkable. Company policy, now they're all at home. So it's a wonderful opportunity to try and change that narrative, where you can say, okay, look, while they're at home, these are some tiny small changes that we can make along the way that will lead to bigger, more sustainable changes in your company. But it's got to start from the top down. It cannot just be given lip service. What did you say? Business flavor? Was that
business flavored entertainment.
Business flavored entertainment. Hashtag. That was I like that line. So I think it's important to note that. I'm working right now, for example, with a company who we are doing a 5-week program on negotiation skills. And it's a 5-week course, twice a week. And the staff have committed to showing up twice a week for 5 weeks on to actually learn and practice negotiation skills. 2-3 years ago, maybe that wouldn't have happened. So we are beginning to see a change, and hats off to the companies that are able to see this and invest this kind of time and resources in their staff.
I think there is an element of one of the elements that has helped that a lot is the fact that we are at home. Sure. You hear this from a lot of people, but I have a friend here in Barcelona, Ian Gibbs, whose whole work is on learnability, as he calls it, making people better learners. And one of the things he's been railing against for years, and not necessarily getting a great deal of success with that, is training shouldn't be 6 hours every day for a couple of days and then never again. It's just people won't absorb knowledge that way. It can work as a transformational experience if you're trying for some sort of breakthrough, maybe an emotional one. But if you're trying to change people's skill base and knowledge base, that is just not the way to teach them. And I think that it would be much harder for all parts involved if we propose to a company, like for example, if I'm talking to companies now about the story work I do, and I say to them, listen, we can tailor it to whatever we think works best, but my experience, what works best is we're doing a couple of hours, no more than twice a week for 2 or 3 weeks. And that's fine, because you log on, you do it, and you get out. But how would you ever do that if you had to do it live well, so I'm going to come over to your company 4 times over the next 2 weeks, and then you're going to put your... I think it would just never work. Meetings would get on the way. That there was so either you do the 2 days, or you just didn't do it. Yeah. So in that sense, I think being online has helped that approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, in this particular case, this 5-week course is hybrid. So it's we do some stuff presential and we do some stuff online. So that's, for me, one of the phoenixes that has risen out of the ashes of the pandemic, is this idea of being able to move through from the digital to the physical world with ease, in order to be able to help deliver your message to companies. So I'm quite positive about companies that can see this and are prepared to commit. And also, it says, when a company says to its staff, this is a 5-week program where you are expected to show up to all of the sessions. In fact, in this particular company, the bosses, the top line bosses, and even the owner of the company shows up to. So they're that really shows you a commitment to real, long-lasting change.
Well, yeah, it not only shows a commitment, but it shows that the project actually has a chance in hell of succeeding. Because in a lot of these cases, if you don't have the top of the company, the leaders of the company, not necessarily taking part, but if they're not fully bought in, then some of these things are just not feasible. For example, if you're doing any type of communications training, one of the things that almost every communications trainer is going to do is try to push people away from the usual PowerPoint approaches that everybody has. And if you don't have buy-in to the company, the first time someone goes to do a presentation and they say, so if you're going to turn on your slides, no, I don't have any slides for this one. So what do you mean you don't have any slides? You need to have slides. So all that effort's gone down the drain to a great extent. Right. So you mentioned 2 things I wanted to pick up on. The first one is you started talking about Tony Robbins, and what you just said about breakthrough events. Maybe that's not what you meant, but I always had this sneaky suspicion with a lot of the Tony Robbins stuff. Not that it's not amazing. I've seen him live, and he's a very, very impressive speaker. There was no question that he's easily one of the best speakers in the world. But I know a lot of people, and you probably do too, who have gone to a number of Tony Robbins, Unleash the Power effort. Some people make a point of going like every year or every other year to it. And, it's a great event, and I'm sure there is plenty of value for things of that nature. I know you run a retreat that is sort of a pit stop, and I think the idea of a pit stop is there's lots of value in it. But if it's meant to be that transformational, but you want to go and do the transformation every single year, I find it a bit...
you've hit the nail on the head there as far as this whole world of self-improvement is concerned. I got into the world of self-improvement in 92, straight after university. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and I felt I was all dressed up with nowhere to go. And I hit upon this Tony Robbins guy, and I read his book, and I was enamored by the book, and so I went to his course, and I think it was in North London, Alexandra Palace, and there were maybe 6,000 people there. I mean, now he does 60,000, 200,000, but there were only 6,000 people there. And so for him, that's an intimate kind of, weekend. And it was groundbreaking. It was fantastic. We did the walking on fire, we did all this stuff. But I do remember when I arrived, and everybody was screaming and shouting, quite American style, yeah, you're the best, you're the best. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness me, this is not really what I signed up for. But I paid £850 for the course. And I just
which given how long ago it was, is about £3 million today. Yes.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, give or take a couple. And so I just remember, Frank, I remember being in this room and seeing all these crazy, hysterical people screaming and shouting and saying, I'm the best, and dancing to You're Simply the Best. And I thought, oh my goodness me. And then at some point I thought, Tony, you just paid £850 for this. And for me, that was a lot, because in those days I was only earning £713 a month working for Novartis. And I remember thinking, well, I've paid almost a month's salary or over a month's salary on this. I'm just going to get my month's salary and more from this. So I joined them and I started. And I think when I had that breakthrough, I really started to get into the spirit of things. But I knew in my mind that I wouldn't go back to another. I knew that after this, I've got what I came to get. And I didn't feel the necessity to go back to another one, because, then they sell you up, they upsell you to do more and more and more. And I just, that was it after that.
Yeah, that was the part of it that I absolutely despised, because the event itself, I mean, there were some interesting takeaways. I don't think I can remember a single one now, but in the moment, there was a lot of buy-in and it was great fun. We had us dancing throughout most of it. And I think if that was a keynote for a conference that then has a whole bunch of skill-based things, right, or behavioral change-based things that are along those lines, then that would have set you off really well for the rest of the learning. But what it was 3 hours of him being amazing, and then the worst type of sales that I've ever seen in my life, where it's people telling some sort of sob story that you can clearly see is being told 150 times in the last week, and then it's like, if you run to the back of the room now, then you get this at a discount, and people generally running, which you knew had been paid to run to make it. Right. See, it just left me very bad taste in my mouth that this titan in the industry, arguably one of the most well-known, if not the most well-known speaker in the world, then sells with the crappy timeshare techniques. And typically what they were selling wasn't, I mean, it wasn't even like, I think they were selling another event of his, but during the day they were selling all sorts of crap. No, it wasn't. I went once. I thought it was nice. I don't know if I could bring myself to go to another one. Not so much because of him. I think his stuff is interesting, and I've seen him do very powerful stuff. But I think the setting and the framework for the whole event is, I don't think that what you take away from it is more than a nice memory of what it was, and you might just walk away with a big hole in your bank account. No.
Well, I remember when I went, as I said, it was in '92, so there weren't any of those frills that I've heard that are attached to his. Maybe he didn't even have a second program, so there wasn't anyone really selling any of that. So I probably didn't get all of the frills and paraphernalia that subsequent events have. I do remember, for example, meeting a guy who we formed this group afterwards called the Yes Group. Sounds all cheesy now. Yes, your excellence succeeds. So that was the group we formed, and for a good year we would meet at this guy's house every Wednesday, and we would look to try and imbibe the ideas of Tony Robbins. And it worked. There were 5 of us in the group, and it was really good. And then, obviously I moved off and did various things. About 20 years later, I was watching CNN, and one of the guys the guy whose house we used to meet at in Hampstead, London, Simon Woodruff, he was on CNN, and I looked at him, and he's the founder of Yo Sushi, and he's one of the dragons on Dragon's Den. And I do remember when we used to meet at his house, he used to wear odd coloured socks, and he used to share his story of how one day he's going to run a sushi brand, and so he took that stuff, the Tony Robbins stuff, and he imbibed it, and he believed in it. And 20 years later, he's a multi millionaire, hugely successful. He's a public speaker. So there are some wins, from those type of courses, but of course the majority of them are just personal development junkies.
Yes, that's very much the case. All right, so the other thread that I wanted to pick on was negotiation, because it's something you do a lot of. You actually wearing the shirt, literally. So when you're trying to... So first of all, what's the thing that people what's the most common mistake you find, or mistakes, when you go in to try and help people improve their negotiation skills? What are they doing that is so terrible?
Well, firstly, you hear the word negotiate. You know, we did a survey of 300 people, and we asked them, when you hear the word negotiate, what comes to your mind? And you know, they think it's win or get the deal. So we had win, get the deal, and then we had trick. Okay, so and conflict came up as well. So the word negotiation has negative connotations. When you talk about, you know, let's negotiate. No, I don't. You know, it feels something underhand is going on, and there's a good reason for this. And the reason for this is because the old way of negotiating was I win, you lose. So if you and I go in, it's, you know, it's like a distributive negotiation. So for every piece of the pie I take is one piece less for you. So that's going to mean that one of us will leave the negotiation table not feeling very good. Emotionally intelligent negotiation is you know what I'm really passionate about. Bringing the world of emotional intelligence into a negotiation, just as we did 30 years ago when we brought the world of emotional intelligence into leadership. Today, you would not be able to be a leader. You couldn't speak to a leader who didn't have an emotional level of emotional intelligence.
Well,
it's the same thing with, well, yeah. Don't go there. I know what you're going to say. Don't go there.
No, I was actually not going to go political at all, but
all right.
It's shocking how often you see people that don't have a finger on the pulse of what society is thinking. And, you know, I don't want to go down the road of what's politically correct, what's not, but just the other day, I forget the company now, but just the other day, the CEO of a very large company got onto a call and started telling people how they should never do any unconscious bias training, because unconscious bias is complete nonsense and blah, blah, blah. And I know that the science behind the effectiveness of the training has been challenged. And it's one thing to say, you know, I think this is definitely something we need to take very seriously. I am slightly concerned because I've seen that those trainings have tended not to be effective. So I just want to explore what other options we have other than that. But he essentially started swearing it off without any context. So this is me reading it nicely. Yeah. But he was just, this is nonsense. Unconscious bias, blah. Basically saying unconscious bias doesn't exist. I think what were his actual words.
Well, you know, the interesting thing about an unconscious bias is that we do not want to be separated from our unconscious bias because it makes us comfortable. It's what we're brought up with. It's what we, you know, we know our unconscious biases so much better than we actually know ourselves in many ways, and in fact, so much so that we don't recognize it as an unconscious bias. And to try and cleave somebody away from their unconscious biases is like trying to kind of peel the skin off an ant. It's very, very difficult to do so, and you will always come up against resistance. And actually, that's why, you know, I love this podcast idea, because one of the most successful ways to do this is by telling stories. I was on a webinar at Harvard Law School last week, and they were talking about the power of stories in negotiation. And the idea being, if you have an unconscious bias, instead of trying to go head to head and try and tell you that your unconscious bias is wrong and make you feel defensive, well, that's an interesting point of view. Tell me the story behind how you came up with that idea. So I'm inviting you to reflect on how that unconscious bias actually was created. And through that journey, I probably learned some more things about you than I did. So it's a win-win. It's a way to build that bridge of empathy by asking the person or inviting them to reflect on the story that led them to that specific point of view. And it's a very powerful tool to use in negotiation.
Yeah, because stories are, I mean, that would be my go-to for negotiation. I find the word negotiation, as you said, it can be problematic, because when I think of negotiation, what I'm thinking of is when I went to Turkey, and you go to the bazaar, and I don't know what it was. It wasn't a carpet, but it was something my wife liked, and we said, okay, so how much is it? And the guy said something like 2,000 euros. And it's like, it's not 2,000 euros. Like, you know that, I know that. What's the actual price? And he really didn't. They don't. That's a different concept for them. There's no such thing as the price. The price is what he manages to sell you for.
Right.
And I don't want that. I just want you to tell me how much it costs. I'll decide if it's worth it or not, and that's it. And I'll move on. But whenever I think of negotiation, I think of this idea of, okay, well, we need to anchor the price or whatever you're trying to achieve, and it's this sort of very tactical approach to it. Yeah. Whereas I would never negotiate that way. Something that people say often about stories is that they are not a push strategy. You're not throwing information at people or trying to push your agenda at people. They are a pull strategy. So this is what it is. This is what I think, and you're letting people hopefully come to their own conclusions about what you said. Right. Yeah. And if you chose the story well, when you told it well, the conclusions shouldn't be too far off from your conclusions from that learning experience. Right. But when you go teach negotiation, would I be wrong in saying that most people are expecting more of the tactical type of stuff and not the woo-woo, nicey of let me tell you a story type of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so we immediately dispel that myth. We like to take that myth and smash it into pieces, because the idea of going into a negotiation in the 80s was win-win. Sorry, not win-win, was win-lose, right? I got to take this guy out. I've got to take this woman out. I've got to win. And that's just so tiresome and so old school. And when you're presented with an option to go in and win the deal, or to go in and build a relationship, you win the deal. How does that make you feel? It makes you feel good for the moment. But what if you win the relationship? What if you build a relationship? What other things are you missing out? So, I mean, I've asked these questions in my courses. So, what's most important to you, winning the deal or building a relationship? And I hear people saying, okay, winning the deal. Okay. And then you just ask, so what other things do you think you may be missing out on having built a relationship? Give me some examples in your life where things have happened because you've built a relationship that you didn't even expect. And then we start to open the door to the possibilities of things that may happen that you didn't even expect. And so one of there's a great book which I love. It's called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Yeah. And he's fantastic. And he says, never be so focused on what you want that you may miss out on something better. And so that's the whole philosophy of having a conversation with your counterpart. Having a conversation and making sure that it's not me versus Francisco. It's Francisco and me, and we are going to collaborate to create a solution, right? You're talking to me on the other side because you have an interest in what I have an interest in. So therefore, the situation is what we're going to work on. And the situation you talked about in the Marrakesh market, that's not a negotiation. That's bargaining. That's I say 10, you say 15, and that's bargaining. And you don't need a course to teach you that, right?
I do. I'm pretty rubbish at that. I just walk away and go, "Oh, you want to negotiate?" I'm walking away. I don't want this. It's too much stress.
But it does. I mean, it does require a level of emotional intelligence. The Health Organization has placed emotional intelligence in the top 10 skill requisites that we require moving into 2021, 2022. So it is a very, very important requisite that we need. And I think if we can bring this idea of emotional intelligence into the way we communicate and negotiate, then we start to evaporate this myth that it needs to be a frosty confrontation, more of a friendly conversation.
I have the distinct feeling that your love and learning about negotiation has come out of the fact that you're immediately outnumbered by your children. And any type of confrontational approach was gonna fall by the wayside.
Oh, totally.
Very quickly.
Totally. Listen, I realized when they were about 3 years old, I looked in their eyes and I realized that they realized that we outnumber these guys. And they are the master negotiators, absolute masters. They hunt in packs. They share information.
They are hyenas, Tony. That's what they are. Hyenas.
My goodness me. They just know how. Yeah.
I was with our another friend we have in common, Tobias Rodriguez, and all our friends in common have been on this podcast, by the way. And I was with Tobias at his house, and his kid was giving him a bit of lip, and I think he just said to her, "Do you really want to have an argument with me?" And she's like, who always wins these arguments? And she says, you. And that was it. That was the end of the conversation. And then I thought, well, Tony can't pull that off.
No. And wait. I mean, I think Tobias's kid is 7 years old. Let's wait.
Oh yeah, it's true. The power of our authority as parents is eroded very quickly.
Yeah.
I'm already finding mine eroded. My kid is 4. I think she's just too opinionated, and half of the stuff is it's just not flying. I mean, I'm not getting that respect for authority that I perhaps mistakenly remember having for my parents.
Yeah. No, I mean, so our kids are now 10 years old, and we really are in the zone of negotiation for everything. Everything is a discussion. You can't get away with because I said so. Forget that. Those days are gone. But it's fun. And here's the cool thing. In the world of negotiation, because it's all online, I'm doing a lot of my courses from home. And when we were in confinement, I realized the kids were picking this stuff up. And so now you'll hear them arguing over something, and then one person will say, okay, let's negotiate this. And I will say, go downstairs, I want you to negotiate, and the one rule is that all of you must be happy. If only one person is happy, or 2 people, it's not a negotiation. Go back and negotiate an agreement where everyone is happy. And they actually do this, and they come back and they say, Daddy, we've got an agreement. And I say, I don't want to know the agreement. I want to know, is everyone happy? Yes. Okay, fine.
Yeah, kids are great teachers of what works for human beings. And it's a shame that we completely forget that, because one of the things I've noticed very quickly with Alice, my oldest one, is that when she's done something wrong and she's really upset, sometimes you just want to tell them off because they've done something wrong, or because they're acting crazy, disproportionately so in your mind. But it just doesn't work at all. It gets you no results. It makes them more frustrated, and it might even cause some damage because you might come across as you're minimizing what's upsetting them. So, you sit down, you look them in the eye, and you ask, are you upset because of this? Are you upset because... And then when you find that they manage to, voice whatever was going on, then they calm down a little. Or when you want to teach them something, telling them doesn't work, so you come up with a story, or you remember a story, or you include it in whatever book they're reading, or you go and find a book that has a story that tells that lesson. But then we grow up and we completely forget those things. Yeah. We think, okay, now I can tell you what to do, because you're a grown-up. Now I can just tell you what to do, and that the way you're behaving is ridiculous. And if I tell you to do something, that's what it should work that way.
Yeah. No, I'll tell you a story. When I realized my son just had it. He was 4 years old, right? And he was at the table, and he was eating with his hands, and he was eating like a pig. And I said to him, will you stop eating like a pig? And he said, can I say something, Daddy? I said, no. I said, stop eating like a pig. He said, but I need to say something, Daddy. And I said, son, I've told you to stop eating like a pig. Will you carry on eating? He said, but I need to say something. I said, okay, what is it? He said, but pigs don't have hands, they can't eat. And I remember thinking that he was 4 years old, and I remember thinking, I've got another 30 years of this. I mean, if I can't win an argument at a table over how he eats, what hope is there for me?
No, Tony, you might be forgetting the most important lesson. If you haven't been inculcating this lesson in your children, you still have time to start, is explaining to them that when kids get to age 18, they have to leave their houses. It's not an option. There is a very terrible curse that happens, which is all life gets sucked out, all the joy of life gets sucked out of their parents if the children don't leave. And then you say, would you like all the joy of life to be sucked out of mommy and daddy? No. Well, then you have to leave at 18. All of you have to leave at 18.
Is that what happened with you? Did it work?
Well, there's a lot of things that my daughter has already learned that perhaps a 4-year-old shouldn't have learned. But one of them is that one day she's going to live in a different house where mommy and daddy are not. She didn't take that nicely when I told her that at age 3, but I'll keep bringing it up. By age 10, this will be fully expected and body expect.
I love kids. I must say, I absolutely do. I actually wanted more. But my wife said, yeah, what happens if we hit the jackpot in another 3 years? I was like, okay, I don't mind. But yeah, it's a delight for me. I love working with kids. I'm working on a really interesting project at the moment with, again, somebody we know in common, Connor. And we're working on a really interesting project to work with children or kids between the age of 19 and 21. Who really are the future, right? So they're the landlords. We are, in the next 10, 15 years' time, we'll be living in the houses where they'll be the owners, right? They'll be running the companies. They'll be making the decisions. So it behoves us at our age to be able to impart our information and our knowledge and experience in a non-defensive way so that they have the skill sets, okay? And so I'm working on this at the moment with Connor, and it's absolutely mind-blowing to get into the minds of these 19, 20-year-olds and how they think. They think differently to the way you and I thought at their age, I have to tell you.
Well, this is a project of trying to essentially teach children and have them not hate whoever taught them, which seems to be what happened to almost every generation for the last ever. All right, Tony, if anyone else wants to find out more of the stuff that you're involved with, is the best place to go your website?
Yeah, you can hit me up on my website, www.ktbounce.com. That's keepthebounce.com. Or connect with me on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. I love watching people's progress on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. And I know you mentioned before we started recording that you normally turn these things down. You haven't done many or any of these podcast interviews before. I hope this hasn't put you off completely for life. But
no, it's been great.
It was a pleasure having you and talking to you again, mate.
Thanks very much. Talk to you soon.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Take care of yourselves. And until next time.